the project that I have sent you all some really, really, really basic information about is I want to build a website that people, in the age range we're looking at for the younger range, is like 3rd grade to 8th grade, and then a section for adults. I'm treating high school level as adult in that particular case, where they can hands-on practice and learn how to take a test. Okay, we talked about all kinds of other options yesterday, but I really want to focus on keeping it down to this how to take a test. Okay. And right now I think I've got 23 people on. We've got the 4 of you, and I know on Tuesday I think I've got another 7 more. But people drop off, and I expect this is an open source project, so people will drop off, people will come back on. I'm going to record a lot of this as we go through when I have interactions with folks, and I'm going to talk about how I see some of this occurring, especially with a group this large. Okay, I'd love to have everybody to have some input on this and learn some things and grow. And we'll talk about that too. And I want to talk about what you guys get out of it as well. Okay. So next slide. This is really simple. These are my goals for this project. And these are my goals for this project. You're going to have other goals you want to get out of this. Okay. And I want to take those into account. I want to build something that helps my children, my kids, with test taking skills. My daughter's 3. It's going to be a while before she gets there. Okay. My son is 11. And most of this has kind of bounced around in my head for the last year or so. Last year, he got his results back on his math skills. And this is the standardized test stuff. And he evaluated at grade level. Perfect. That's good. What I found out later in talking with the teacher was he didn't answer like 20 questions on the tests. So he managed at grade level and only covered 80% of the questions. And I'm thinking to myself, I've had tons and tons and tons of advice on how to take tests. And it's advice I actually did listen to eventually. And I'm very, very good at taking tests. And there's no way I would have had 20 missed questions. I mean, if I got down to the last 2 minutes and I had 20 questions I hadn't touched, at the very least, I'd be going through and answering C, right? You get something in there. And I asked him a basic question. I'm like, did you mark the hard questions and come back to them? And he's like, I don't even think we can do that, which is possible. I don't know for sure. But there's a part of me that wonders, did he just not know or just not pay attention to how that's done? Has he ever even tried that before with the system? So I'd love to have a system that can teach him some of that stuff. And my second goal is I want to work with developers, folks like you. It gives me the ability to evaluate your skills and what can you guys get out of this project. And that's number one. I want to be able to mentor some of the folks that I'm working with. I don't know how much one-on-one we'll manage, but we're going to try. Okay, we're going to try and get as much as we can. They may be more group-ish type sessions, but I'd still love to have you guys writing the code rather than me. Okay. And, if you're applying for jobs, I want to be that person that can give a recommendation because I have worked with you and I know you. And it's not the same as having a coffee chat with you, even if that's, I have folks that I've coffee chatted with every week for a year. And yes, I can give them a recommendation, but I can't talk to the code they write. Not well. And that's what I want to, part of what I want to give you guys out of this. I mean, a way that I can help you to move forward. Okay. All right. So let's move on here. So what am I asking for? I can't afford to pay anybody. Okay. I'm looking at this going, can I manage to pay for a URL and get hosting and that kind of stuff? And, there's costs there. I'm already paying for GitHub. I want to look into Jira. I don't know what that takes to pay for because I'd rather have you guys use real business practices. The issues on GitHub are good. I know we can use Trello boards, but Jira is what most businesses use in tracking business cards. So if I can pay for that, that's fine. So I want to keep that down. Like I said, I'm not going to be able to pay anybody, but the payment is their referral. That's what I'm hoping you see the value of and the learning that you get out of it as well. There is a big if that came to mind when I talked about money. And, we're building a product. And if somebody down the road opts to say, hey, we'll buy that from you, we want to incorporate it into our website, whatever, I'm not leaving leading edge, so I mean that's the only option that they get a product like this. Anybody that works on the project, I'm going to try and fairly compensate. Okay, I don't know what that's going to look like. May never happen. Okay, that's why we're talking about a big if here. Okay, this will be a product that will be usable by my children. That's the main goal I've got. But just in talking to my wife as a teacher, and in the last group we had, I can't even tell you how many of them were teachers, but at least half would be my guess, because I was getting a lot of teacher-ish type comments. It sounded to me like there's a lot of interest in this as a product. So theoretically, somebody might want to take this and monetize it, and that's not my goal. But if it reaches that point, if somebody's offering me good money, it's going to be really hard to turn down. And, if you guys are putting the work in, you deserve some part of that. Okay. Like I said, don't know what that is at the moment. We'll figure that out when we get there. Okay. So your time, the absolute minimum I'm asking is nothing. Okay. I'm going to be recording a lot, and you'll hear some of this as we go through here. If all you really want to do is follow along and see how the project's built and hear all the conversations and that's absolutely fine by me. Okay. I'm not forcing anybody to do anything. I'm not making any requirements on anybody that you have to put in X number of hours. Okay. The maximum, as you see here, is what you can manage. I don't want to interfere with work. I don't want to interfere with other things you're trying to learn. I don't want to interfere with you trying to get a job. Okay. What you can manage. What I'd like to have, and I'm probably setting myself up for a lot of chatting with people, is one-on-ones every other week. I need to get to know you. I need to get to know you writing code. And in these one-on-ones, I'm not thinking like the normal hour coffee chats that I do. I'm thinking more like a 30-minute, let's look at some of the code that you've been writing, whether it's for this project or something else, so that I have that basis to make those good recommendations. Okay. I'm hoping for 1 to 2 hours every other week. And when you look at 30 plus people, that's a lot of hours. Okay. And that's a lot of hours that I have to follow up with and manage and that kind of stuff too. So, these follow recordings is needed. I'm not going to start the stuff this week. We're going to start the week after. My hope in there is that you can be involved as we have these meetings. I'm going to kind of somewhat let the group randomly pick 3 main meetings that we'll have for planning and organization. There'll be larger group sessions. We have folks from all over the world, so that's why I'm going to have folks each week have a different group of 3 pick those 3 dates, and we'll record those. And in between, we may have sessions where I'm getting with somebody to do a code review, where we go through some of the code they're writing or help them solve a problem. Anytime I'm in with somebody doing that, whether it's one person or all 30, I want to try and record it. Okay. So if you do miss something, if you have to take a week or 2 or 3 weeks off or whatever, and you want to come back, go catch up on those recordings and you can jump right back in. Okay. The stretch goal for you guys, and there's part of a stretch goal in there for me as well, is to learn something new. Okay. A lot of folks came in saying, hey, I want to learn something new with Angular. There were some folks that came in, I know Angular, but I see that you're building something cool, so I want to get involved with that. Whatever your reason is, the hope is that you learn something new through this process, whether that's writing code or helping out with some section of this that you don't know. We've got a couple of folks in here that sound like they're really good with UI, UX. If you got any interest in that, we got those folks there. We have one I know of at least that's working doing accessibility with a company. And now, granted, she just started, but she's learning about accessibility, and I'm not real good at accessibility. So maybe we'll take some of her learnings and have a session or 2 on that somewhere in here. Okay. Learn something new. That's a big goal in here with your time. Okay. So moving forward, we are taking tests, and these are the 6 basic ones that I always remember, which is, you do the easy question first. You don't spend much time on any one question. You drop any obvious wrong answers as you're looking through, so that you can at least have a 50-50 guess on which one's the right answer. You mark those hard questions to go back to. You watch for answers in the questions. I actually had one on the latest when I took my AWS certification about 1.5 years ago, where I had narrowed down. I'm like, these 2 clearly are not it. It's one of these 2, and I picked. This one felt right. It's the only time I can remember in the last 25 years that I changed a question, because later on I saw something in a question that told me the one I had picked was wrong. And so I was able to go back and find that question and pick the right one. It's very, very rare that I ever want to. That's the last one here that I usually use. I'm willing to add more. Okay, and I want to go through this a little bit because I'm going to talk a little bit more about what I see these screens looking like. At the same time, these are the kind of things that we want to be able to quantify. We want to be able to track. We want to be able to showcase as they take practice tests. Okay, I'm going to show this next screen, but don't be too hard on trying to read it. These are my handwritten notes. This is my brainstorming. I wanted people to see, this is what I wrote down over about 3 or 4 weeks to kind of get to where this slide deck is now. Okay, this will go into the wiki. We are going to have a wiki. Anybody will be able to submit and add content to it or ask questions on it or whatever we need to do. But this is where it all started. This was this idea in my head, and I had to write something down. These ideas in my head float around all the time, and sometimes they fade away, and I want to make sure I keep those notes. Okay, and so that really did turn into what the rest of this document's about. So, project work. Okay, we may or may not have teams. I don't know exactly how we're going to do that. That may shift down the road. Initially, I'm probably going to work with everybody as one larger group. Okay, we're going to need to do planning and build cards and week cards as business would normally do, and flesh out what those cards need to be. The ultimate goal would be anybody that picks up one of those cards to work should be able to work it and know what the expectations are when you're finished. We need a visual design, UI, UX, and I know there are a couple of folks that are already itching to put some designs together. A couple of folks that were talking about, let's look at the competition, what other people are building. I don't even know who the competition is at this point. Okay. We need to have a workboard that those cards are on so we can track the work as it moves across. And all of this has to be built out. I mean, right now I have a repo and that's it. And there's like 3 images I just pushed up because I found a couple things for the slide deck yesterday. We need to build out a README, a proper README. We were going to put an Angular thing together, so Angular is going to generate a README, and we're going to throw most of that away. If you've worked with React, you've seen that README it builds. It's not real useful for day-to-day use on the project. I mean, yeah, it gets those little basics on how you run, how you start the project up for your work locally. But in the grand scheme, once you've done that a couple dozen times, you really don't need that in the README, right? So we need something that's more like what business would have. I do want to build up pipelines. So you're going to see some of this. You're going to see us build up GitHub pages. Our GitHub page, we can't use GitHub pages for the commercial use that we're intending here. It's very possible we're going to go far past the limits of what GitHub pages allows. Okay, so we are going to need some level of hosting somewhere along the way, but we'll use the GitHub pages for our dev testing. Okay, we're going to set up the PR so they have to be reviewed by 2 people. I may see if I can set it up so I have to be on all of them, which clearly adds a lot more work for me, but I'm okay with that. And I want to have unit testing block those PRs when you're trying to merge it into main. So if the tests are failing, you can't merge. You got to make sure those tests are passing. Okay. And in our base test, speaking of unit tests, we do want to have unit tests. We are going to look at end-to-end tests. And I want to actually, I haven't heard anybody yet talking about they've been working with manual testing as one of the people that's in on this project. But if worse comes to worse, I'll talk with somebody at Leading Edge or on my team at Cardinal that does manual testing. And I know they use spreadsheets and things like that to track what it is they're testing and how they validate and things like that. So I want to follow the good practices there. And I said earlier, I want to have accessibility. And I know we have a couple of accessibility folks. I want to learn some new things here too. Okay. This is something that's made for children, made for folks that are taking tests in a classroom. And I know just from my 2 that any other thing we can put in here that'll help getting this accessibility right is probably an important piece. Okay. Sessions. Right now, I'm looking at like a group pairing session, probably 3 days a week. We may evaluate that down to 2, depending on how heavily I get buried. Okay. What I've told people when I mention this is I see this project running 1 to 2 ways. It's either going to go really cool and really slick, and we're going to have a lot of fun, and we're going to build something really cool, or it's going to be a hot mess, and I'm going to be so buried I can barely keep up with you guys. Right now, I'm not sure which it's going to be. I'm hoping for the first one and not the second one. Okay. I'm going to record anytime I'm on and doing this stuff. The main goal for that is for you guys to be able to catch up if you do fall behind, if you need to drop off for a reason and come back. Okay. I still like that idea of, just publicly putting out how we're building this project. I think it's kind of cool to keep that track of that. I've never tried this before, so this will be kind of cool. At the start, first things we need to do is set up that repo, set up the pipeline, figure out how we're going to do the cards and that kind of stuff. We are going to work with Angular, so once we've got a base Angular project in place, I plan on having a session or two just on what we're intending to do with Angular, and maybe poke around a little bit about what it takes to work in Angular. Question came up yesterday. I do have a Discord server set up, and I'll get that to you guys later so you can join. Question came up on the Discord server about where to go to start looking at Angular. And I'll be honest, the best resources I've seen, and there's somebody else commented another one that he liked, but the best resources I've seen for Angular, and probably where I go 3 times out of 4 when I'm looking for some sort of documentation on a particular feature, is the Angular documentation. Angular.io has some incredible resources out there and tooling. I would like to do one-on-ones with each of you every other week. I don't know how long they're going to be. I'm hoping for shorter, because we'll be looking at code and we're going to be talking with each other over time. And I've met some of you before. Okay, so we've got at least a basis with some of you, and it's about half from what I've seen. If I get too buried on those, I may ask to back off a little bit. Okay, but it's going to be on you guys to schedule those as opposed to me. If you've got my Calendly, jump in there, throw one on. If you don't have my Calendly, reach out and we'll get that in play. Okay, and we're getting close here. Okay, so additional project work we need. I did talk about the URL, domain name, that other hosting, someplace to host this thing. There was question yesterday of, should we use a database? I was thinking primarily of building something that we didn't need a full-fledged back end. But then questions came up on, how do parents track, how do teachers track, and I'm still waffling on that. I had this vision in my head of having kind of a summary page of how you did as you went through that practice test. And, student in a classroom, they get to that point, teacher goes around and she's looking at all the screens and, seeing roughly what everybody did. As a parent, I get my son on there, I just tell him, when you get to the summary, let me see how you're doing. And if I'm storing it locally on that machine, I mean, we could use IndexedDB fairly easy on the local machine to store this data. I could see that individual one, or I could hop in on that machine and take a look and see the summary over time. Doesn't work well for a classroom, so I'm still not 100% sold on my way. I can be talked into building out a back-end database. I know a lot of the folks at 100 Devs have worked with Node. I'm not sure which database, but we can figure that out. But we need something that's buildable that we can push out. And you guys have done that, so I may need some help with that. Okay. There will be some solo work in pairing, where you're trying to work on one of the cards for the project, or learn something about Angular to prep for the project or something like that, where you have a question, that'll be paired with me. I may throw out there to some other folks that, hey, we're going to be looking at this one, and if somebody has an interest, here's where we'll be, and give them the chance to hop on. But solo work should be solo work. Sometimes the pairing needs to be one-on-one. Again, it'll still be recorded, so this will be the chance for other folks to look. If you don't want me to record it, we'll figure that out. Okay. We do need to get some content. We need to get some information from the teachers and flesh out what we need to do with the wikis. One of the ones that was brought up was, are we going to cover how the test works for this type of standard or that type of standard? And we have, just in the US, we have 50 states, and Lord knows how many different tests are out there for standardized testing. We have folks from all over the world, so these tests are going to be, I'm okay with doing that maybe as a stretch goal, or a version 2 or a version 3 or a version 4, or adding in these other test types as needed. And if we build the system flexible enough, it should be doable. But we need to get that information. We need to document where we're headed with it. Okay. Marketing and advertising, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do there. Okay. We need some logo. We need some thought on that. I'm a firm advocate of, I'd love to have a sticker on my laptop related to this project. And you guys are out here, so you probably should get one too. And, I have great t-shirts from different projects and different conferences and things like that. Why not something like that for this, right? Documentation. One of the things I want to get on the site too is where are some of the good articles and things related to this? If teachers are hopping on here to get some ideas and things like that, great to have that section to show where we got some of our information from and that kind of thing too. Okay. This is one of the slides I've changed a little bit from the last time. And here start talking about some of the pages. I want to give you an idea of what I perceive, my initial thoughts on what these pages should look like as somebody uses our site, so that we can have proper discussion. So main page, what I foresee is, up at the top, you're gonna have something really simple, just a series of buttons that they can click, almost like tabs, that are grade level, 3 through 8, maybe just adult after that. Maybe it's high school and adult. And now under that, like in that high school level, maybe you got an option for practicing for SAT, which is going to be different than practicing for other tests. Question came up yesterday on, do we see this as practicing for electronic tests or paper? And in my mind, it's both. Most of these concepts apply for both. You don't necessarily have to flag it on a paper test. Could be just as easily as circling something or folding down the corner of a page if it's a multiple page test. The list of suggestions that we looked at before, have that on there somewhere, but in language, in proper language for the age level. So if we're talking 3rd grade, it's going to be different than what you write for 8th grade. Certainly going to be different than what you put for adult. The list of articles and resources should be referable somewhere in there. And then on the tests, I had originally talked about like hand holding me, where you're going through and it shows you everything. You get to the page and it's identifying where the questions are and where the navigation is and how do you flag, and verbal. I was a vocational teacher, so visual, audio, kinesthetic. When it comes up, we want this visual to isolate that area, have some text that comes up that they can read about it, and we have somebody, probably not me, voice recording, so we can speak through what it is that's happening on that page, what it is they need to do. Hey, we're looking at these questions, and we look at this question, and if it's, let's say, 5 times 5, we know 13 and 12 aren't because they don't end in a 0 or 5. So that narrows it down to these 2 possibilities. Now, how do we take it further? This is an easy question versus this is a hard question, or, and we can prep these tests so that one of the questions in there, you've narrowed it down to 2 answers, and maybe later on in a question, you've actually got the answer to that one, so that if they had marked it properly and we tell them this, they can come back to it as they go through the marked ones and pick the right one. The walk would be something where they go through the test, but it has a gentle assist. So you're going through the test and you're on a question and you're sitting there for 30 seconds and it's still sitting there. Our timer should kick in and pop up and say, hey, you've been here a long time. Should you maybe mark this question and come back to it later? Or they've picked an answer and they're getting ready to pick a second one. And hey, one of the rules is you don't change it unless you're absolutely sure. And those things, when they make those kind of selections, right or wrong, I'd like to have on a summary page, and I'll talk about that here in a bit. But I did remember after the fact that the U.S. Army, when I worked with the Army, used crawl, walk, run as their phrasing of this. And red, green, blue are the colors, although I think, with the military, with adults, it's probably okay to use the red, green, blue. But maybe we use like an orangish color or a pinkish color or something like that for the red size. Having this iconography that kind of gives them that visual. For the younger kids, that's going to be better. And if they use the system over time, it kind of locks that in on which type of test they're taking. And then the run would be just you go through it. There's no help. But you get to the end and you see the summary of how well you did in terms of, did you skip the right questions? Or were you coming back to questions? Did you change something or something like that? Test cover page. When you start a test, any of our tests, there's a cover page. And this is all the stuff that most people don't read. I've learned over the years to read every bit of it because there's often test taking clues that I might shift my patterns a little bit for. And clearly a start button, nothing complicated there, right? So then we have test question page, question timer, navigation flags. Question came up here over some of the tests for like English language, have that ability to highlight and things like this and show progress on reading through something to simplify and help. And I'm absolutely okay with adding those things in once we identify what those are. My initial thought is let's stick to the basics and keep it fairly simple. I don't have a problem with adding functionality, but we need to identify, we need to get courage written up, we need to figure out when the right time is to bring it in on the project, okay? And once they've gone through all their test questions, they have a test summary page, which would be different from our summary page. This is just a did you pass? I was actually pretty scared by how difficult it was to find whether I passed or failed my AWS exam, because it was just this little like 12-point font at the bottom of a full page of content telling me how I was going to get my results and this and that. And it said, you passed. And let me tell you, when you see that, you don't have a way to record that screen, and you don't actually get your results on passed for like 2 weeks. I questioned whether I saw the right thing or not on that screen quite a bit. Okay. So, talk about the summary page a little bit. Nothing doesn't have to be anything huge there. Our process summary page is probably the more important one. Did you do things correctly? How much time did you spend on easy questions versus hard questions? Did you skip the hard ones? Or spend a lot of time and try and answer? Did you try and change answers? Those kind of things. Okay. This is the core of what I want to build. Okay. So for recording purposes here, I'm going to go back to the very first slide deck, and then we'll open it up for questions. But I want to give it a little bit, like about a 5-second time break in between, so I can chop up. I don't intend to put the first part of this recording, if that's for you guys. I recorded it anyway in case we decide we really want to keep it. So let's take that 5-second break here. Then if you guys have questions, we'll ask questions. That recording will get posted up as we go through it, okay? Okay, so do you guys have any questions of me on what we just went over? Okay, Mohammed. Yes, go ahead.
Hi, Bob. For this app or this tool, do we have plans on making it mobile accessible as well, or is it strictly desktop?
Good question. The core of it's going to be desktop. I did have this thought in conversation with folks yesterday that maybe in the yes, it would make some sense to have mobile to a degree, but my thought is maybe the mobile is prepped more for like a quick overview of the rules, the general rules that we're saying we should apply when you practice or when you're taking a test, so that I'm trying to think about how a test taker would use it. So if I were going to take my next AWS certification, one of the things that I do is I have a written list of things that I struggled with in prepping for the test that I go over with right before I go in. And maybe the mobile version of this site shows that. That maybe that's the primary thing. Maybe you could do some of the other things, but the primary would be, let's get that quick overview of what it is you should do when you're taking the test. And then you put the phone down because you can't take it in, and you head in to take your test. I think building it mobile first, building the entire website mobile first is not a bad idea at all. I don't know what all of our components or things are going to look like, but maybe our main page and suite, let's talk to the UI and UX folks, with maybe the main pages or Material UI or something like that. And if we follow that kind of a pattern, Material has a lot of good stuff on handling responsive pages right out of the gate. But at least initially, my thought would be that main page when it goes into mobile, that's the first thing you see are those hints and tips, and that's it. Kind of streamlined down, so then maybe a menu from there to see some of the other stuff. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay. Good question. Anything else? Okay. I know it's a smaller group, and if you don't have any other questions, that's fine. Given the fact that we only had the one question, maybe what I'll do is I'll keep the first part, trim out that little thing where I'm talking about the 5 seconds in between, and then push that up because it's right around 30 minutes. Okay. Looking forward to working with you guys. I'm going to stop the record here, and if you want to chat after for a bit, non-project related, I think that's fine too. So let me find this. A great UI, you have to go all the way back to the menu to stop the record. The pretty red button up at the top says recording, you can't use that to